You kind of hold your breath and you wait to see how it plays out. You wait to see how the victims are identified. If they're identified, you wait to see who the shooter is and what his or her affiliation is. And so this was no different, except that it happened on Saturday and the Kentucky Derby was on. And I was already focused on the Derby because this was a deadly Derby. I mean, and then before the race even begins, there's another scratch. That means there's 5 scratches, 5 horses who were supposed to run that don't run, and 5 deaths on the very surface that the Derby is going to be run, Churchill Downs. And one of the deaths was a horse that was supposed to run in the Derby. So it was just for the first Saturday in May, the first Saturday of Asian American, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander Heritage Month. I mean, it was my head was already spinning with, well, what's going to happen? They're going to run the Derby. And then McAllen happens. Or not McAllen, excuse me. I don't want to get my Texas towns, but Allen, and I should know this because I lived in Dallas. I know that area, McKinney, North Dallas, booming. I left and it boomed. When I was there, it was still kind of on the verge of happening. But that whole area, Allen, a lot of people in Dallas, that's sort of like the northernmost suburb, right? People out in the mall, not paying attention to the Kentucky Derby, and there's a shooting. So, the rest. Well, I don't know if you know the rest of the story yet, but there were 4 Asian Americans. I mean, not that I want anyone of any ethnicity in particular to be heard. It's just that when you are Asian centric, like generally most of the media I write for, it's actually, I write for a much more diverse number of publications. This show, by the way, welcome to Emil Amok's Takeout, my takes on all things considerable. The micro talk show of the AAPI, I call it. And the AAXs, Asian American X, fill in your ethnicity. Or the ALLs, all the rest of you, everyone is included. It's an inclusive show. So I always hold my breath to say, I just hope there aren't any Asians. Because if there are, it means something to a community that has been singled out over the last 2 years, 2.5 years, as scapegoats that resulted in perhaps the most deadly 2.5 years for Asian Americans in the United States in terms of transgressions, minor to major, including death. Let me just say that. I mean, because we had a recording of maybe 12,000 transgressions against Asian Americans during the pandemic because of the scapegoating words of a former president, number 45. So, but those transgressions include everything from, minor to major, including death. Now, I know that the shooter here in Allen, Texas, was not going for Asians, but he got 4 that have been identified, and it's just, makes you think about how Asian Americans are now in the mix. I mean, it used to be that, Monterey Park, that was the first one that made you understand that, hey, we are We're included. We're not excluded from this thing, this American phenomenon, the quintessential American experience, I call it. And so sadly, yes, we interrupt your newly inclusive Asian American, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander Heritage Month for the quintessential American experience, mass gun violence. And it's 4 Asian Americans. 3 of the 4 were of Korean descent, a couple in their 30s, haven't gotten a name yet, but identified by the South Korean consulate in Dallas as a couple in their 30s, and their 3-year-old son shot dead. The oldest child of the couple, reportedly a 5-year-old son, was also shot and is in a local hospital. The 4th Asian American victim, identified as Aishwarya Thatikanda. She was just 27, according to news reports. Thatikanda moved from Hyderabad in India to the U.S. in 2018. She got an advanced degree in civil engineering from Eastern Michigan University, worked as a project engineer with a local Texas firm. According to reports, her family said that she had just gotten a promotion. She was shopping on a Saturday afternoon in America with a friend. Happy AANHPIHM. I mean, it's enough to make you scream, right? And maybe like Leah McGeever, who's a transgender activist in San Francisco, you may have heard about this story last week. On May 2nd, McGeever was protesting an individual shooting, not a mass shooting, an individual shooting, but shootings are shootings. They're all bad. There are too many of them in America. You take them all en masse, you take them one by one, they're all bad. We hear about the big ones, like the ones in Texas this past weekend, but have you heard about Banko Brown? On April 27th, week before last, Brown, 24, San Francisco transgender activist, gunned down in an incident with an armed security guard at a Walgreens in San Francisco. I've been mentioning this generally, but I bring it up now, and you'll see why. Last week, the San Francisco DA, Brooke Jenkins, declined to file murder charges against the security guard, Michael Earl Wayne Anthony Jenkins. And Brooke Jenkins said in a statement that Anthony believed he was in mortal danger and acted in self-defense. That's the way the law is in California. The trans community rallied in protest at a meeting on May 2nd, last week, at the Board of Supervisors. Activist McGeever showed her reaction to authorities' non-action by screaming out loud for the better part of a minute. Here's her quote. "There's a lot of performative people on this board who say one thing in support of black people, homeless people, trans people, and then immediately stab you in the face, being racist, transphobic, and anti-homeless," McGeever said. "I don't have any words prepared today. I just want you to feel our pain. Feel our pain." And that hit me. We all have pain. McGeever continues, "I don't know if you can at this point based off your policy choices, but I have to pretend you have some form of empathy left. So I'm going to spend the next minute screaming because that is what is going on in here." She points to her body inside. That is what the trans genocide in this country, in this city, has brought me to. And then McGeever shrieks and screams a loud and piercing cry. Man, I listened to the tape. The tape is on the ALDEF blog soon, aaldef.org/blog. But that when she shrieked, I felt the pain. I felt her cry. In fact, I wish I had done that 9 years ago when I spoke to the Board of Supervisors myself, when I urged them to take action against gun violence. My words fell on deaf ears. In retrospect, I think a scream might have woken them up. And it would have expressed more than words any anguish and frustration I may have felt. Last week, I wrote about my cousin Stefan's murder in 2014. You can see that on the ALDEF blog, aaldef.org/blog. You know, after a night of partying, Stefan went to the wrong apartment, was shot dead as he walked through the door. The San Francisco DA at the time wouldn't prosecute because the penal code allows for the shooting of an intruder if a homeowner feels threatened. It's the same self-defense grounds that the current DA is using to not prosecute for murder in the case of Banko Brown. District attorney's discretion, they call it. But really, it's a lack of political will. It's a lack of political courage. And all we can do is continue to speak out and call for more legislation to restrict the use of guns. And we can call for local officials to act when gun violence results in the unnecessary deaths of my cousin or of a Banko Brown. And when it comes to the use of guns in mass shootings where self-defense is not an issue, but just the evil purpose of the most efficient killing of human beings in the least amount of time, then we must have an assault weapons ban. We must have red flag laws, restrictions and restraints. We need them all. But we shouldn't make the mistake. This is not a mental health issue. Unless mental health includes a lack of political leadership. So this is really a political leadership issue. Those who remain beholden to the gun lobby are just too cowardly to lead. So in many ways, McGeever, the trans activist at the Board of Supervisors meeting in San Francisco, had the right idea. Words are empty rhetoric in this debate. For the innocent individuals in society who have fallen one by one, and for those who have fallen together in places like Allen, Texas, it's time for all of us to scream. Scream. Because words have no meaning in this political debate. But maybe they will hear our screams. I mean, that was when I saw McGeever do her thing. And like I said, you can catch it on the ALDEF blog. It'll be up shortly. And you hear her scream and you see the video taken from that Board of Supervisors meeting on May 2nd. We're at that point. There's no debate. They just have to hear our screams. They have to hear our cries. And it's not just the immediate victims, the immediate family. And in the case of the South Korean family, Asian Americans gunned down in Allen, the mother and father and a 3-year-old. The 5-year-old is in a hospital as a survivor. The family's there in Texas. And yes, it impacts them, but it impacts all of us. It impacts all Asian Americans. We feel that. But words, we we go to the politicians and we add to the debate, and we talk about assault weapons bans, and we talk about, restrictions, but the words fall on deaf ears. They have to hear our screams. They have to hear the wailing, the mass wailing of pain. Maybe that will move them to action. I mean, locally in San Francisco, we're talking about, it's that version of stand your ground, the castle doctrine, which says, hey, that's the law. The prosecutors don't want to prosecute if they're going to lose, and they don't want to go up against a law like that. Too politically charged. They don't want to wreck their record. Meanwhile, friends and family of victims scratch our heads and say, who's accountable? And, I hate to say this, but this is not about a matter of, like, my cousin was Asian, his murderer was black. This is not trying to pit people together or against each other. I mean, in 9 years, I think I've been able to stand back and say, wait a minute, we're in this together. Because the people who die and the people who lose this argument are the powerless. In the case of my cousin, it was poor Filipino guy gets shot by a poor black guy. Perfect case to let authorities let the case go cold and die. Nothing gets done. Banko Brown, I mean, right now the politics is so hot in San Francisco about crime. But Banko Brown, according to reports, was caught in a time when security guards, retailers are upset about crime and shoplifting. And according to reports, apparently that was one of the reasons why the security guard shot. Now, given that sort of narrative, the DA isn't going to do a thing. Because if she does, she knows that she can incur the wrath of people who think that crime is out of hand. You got to do something. But by doing that, she incurs the wrath of innocent people, powerless people who feel that one of their own has suffered and died, and there's no accountability for his death. This is what happens in a society where guns reign. And I don't know the answer, except it just makes you want to scream, doesn't it? I mean, it makes you want to scream. And maybe if they heard our screams, they would take action. Like in Allen, Texas, the Governor Abbott there, Mr. Second Amendment, Mr. Let's arm everybody. Ridiculous. I mean, right now it's sort of common to say, oh, well, we got a mental health problem in the United States. It's not mental health. We have an aversion problem. We do not want to talk about guns because we don't want to upset the gun lobby. So, of course, the governor is talking about, well, what's the motive? Why did the shooter shoot? Oh, let's not even get into the shooter's racism. We don't know yet. Supposedly, he had on some kind of patch that said right-wing death squad, RWDS, some kind of neo-Nazi group, which is strange because the suspect's name is Mauricio Garcia, in his 30s. Not clear what his motive was, but what a red herring to go down to talk about motive. If there were no guns, you wouldn't have 8 people dead, 9 including Mauricio Garcia. You wouldn't have 3 Korean American family members dead. You wouldn't have 1 young Indian American engineer dead. 4 Asian Americans and the 8 on the list of those who died. You wouldn't have that. I mean, I'm not saying that, well, it'd be better if there was just 1 or 2 dead, but look, if you had 1 or 2 versus 8, I think you'd take that. And if you didn't have an assault weapon, you wouldn't have 8 dead. You might have far fewer, which would be better. Still wouldn't be good. And then, of course, as I've written before, it's not really a matter of how many people get, are killed by guns, because maybe we need to look at the propensity toward violence. Why do we go toward violence as the answer? I mean, that's where people begin to say, oh, let's bring in mental health as an issue. Maybe then, maybe there. But it's not a mental health problem. That will always be there. But you won't have killings if the guns aren't there. And the guns definitely are there. So, I wasn't even paying attention, really, to McAllen yesterday. I didn't pay attention until today. And then I heard, Asian American woman, young woman from India, dead. That got me. Aishwarya Thatikanda. Came 27 years old. Master's in civil engineering from Eastern Michigan. Project engineer, local Texas firm. I guess she was like a construction type. Project manager, got a raise, shopping on a Saturday. Boom. Your life ends. South Korean family, couple in their 30s, 3-year-old son, shot dead. Their 5-year-old survived in a hospital. That's not what you want to hear on the first Saturday in May, in Asian American, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander Heritage Month. Makes you want to scream. Makes you want to scream. So that was pretty bad. I mean, it sort of hit me today because that's when the identities came out. Yesterday, I just kind of shut it all off. Didn't want to hear the grousing between, give me your guns, don't take my guns. And then, of course, we had the car attack, a man in Brownsville driving into a number of people, killing 7 or 8. I mean, it's just, anything can be a weapon, right? It really is violence. Why are we moved to violence? So, yeah, on Saturday, I was paying attention to the Kentucky Derby because I used to follow it with a certain, well, I saw it as a kind of a traditional thing. I mean, for Asian Americans who love to gamble, the Derby was a classic day. For my dad, who loved the horse races, who would take his magnifying glass and look at the daily racing form and try to find a winner, it was a classic day. 50th year after Secretariat won. I mean, that was one of the things they were talking about. But in the last 6-7 years, my enthusiasm for racing has just gone away. And one of the things that did it was to see the number of horses who have died. Like they barely mention a horse dying after the 8th race at Churchill Downs on Saturday, when the pre-races up to the Derby, the Pat Day Mile. They had a horse that broke down, barely a mention. If you were watching on television, they didn't even show it. If it were a major sport and an athlete had died on the track or on the court or on the playing field, do you think they'd hide it from you? Of course not. But horse racing is no longer a legitimate sport. Horse racing is just animal abuse. And it would be too obvious to show a horse fanned off the track and then later euthanized because it broke down. They mentioned it. NBC had the courage to mention it. But was it enough to kill the party? No, the party went on. That should make you think. Today, ask anyone who won the Kentucky Derby. Probably no one can tell you because nobody cares. And if nobody cares, I'd be curious to see what the ratings were. But if no one cares about the Derby, it's maybe time that we start caring instead, not for the race, but we start caring for the horses. The horses who put their lives on their line and pay the price. If you don't really understand, well, why are the horses dying? Why? Listen to the PETA podcast, the PETA podcast, review podcast. And it really shows why the first Saturday in May, the Kentucky Derby, is, in fact, the glorification of horse racing's cruelty on this big scale. Mind you, we had a lot of big things happening on Saturday. We had the King's coronation. I didn't want to pay attention to that. Who cares about the King? King makes a cameo appearance on American Idol. Can't sing, just comes on. Plays around with Lionel Richie. No, it wasn't for the King. Look, why honor colonization any more than you have to? So the King is doing his thing. The Derby is doing its thing. But I think if you want to know why what's happening in racing is happening, why are horses dying, it's because the horses are too drugged not to go fast. That might be a residual effect of some of the drugs. But the drugs are used to mask the pain of an ailing horse that shouldn't be running. Therefore, allowing the horse to run like there's no tomorrow. Hey, I feel good. I'm running. Then the drugs wear off, and then the horse feels like crap, realizes it's overexerted him or herself, then breaks down in a manner that can't be treated. I mean, you say, well, God, a horse breaks a leg. I mean, a human breaks a leg. They can recover from that. No, they can't. Euthanasia is the only answer. after a horse has a break to a leg bone. It's not impossible to recover, but generally speaking, the horses that break down are put to death. So that's racing. That's how drugs are used in racing. That's why drugs are bad. They don't necessarily make the horse run faster. They make the horse think it can run. And then when the drugs wear off, the horse realizes, oh, I shouldn't have run. And then it breaks down and is put to death. That is racing. That is cruel. That should end. I mean, so if I'd be curious to see what the ratings are, and if they're low, that should be a message to everyone in the sport that, number one, it's no longer a sport, no longer a viable sport, and there probably should be alternatives for these animals to live out their lives. Anyway, go to the PETA podcast and you listen to the Kentucky Derbies, or listen why horse racing is dying and why it may not be able to recover. All right, so I think we're going to end it there. Oh, I said I was going to talk about the Dubs. Oh, well, one last word about Stefan, my cousin Stefan. It's tough, because Stefan died on the 3rd. He died on Friday the 3rd on 2014. And, it spills over Friday into Saturday. So it's always that weekend. And I always remember that weekend. So it's always a weekend where there's something like the Kentucky Derby, if it's the first Saturday in May. There's something like people's first Holy Communions. There's all sorts of things that happen in May that, coincide. And I'm thinking about probably one of the worst things that has happened to my family. So it's tough. One of the positive things is that he died during a time when the Giants were really on, flying high, the San Francisco baseball Giants. And I mention it because Stefan loved sports. He loved the Giants, wore his Tim Lincecum jersey. Tim Lincecum, half Filipino. He used to wear his, I think he had a Warriors jersey. Loved the Warriors. Stephen Curry, Stephen Guillermo. Which brings us to the topic of the Dubs playing tonight. Oh, it's crucial tonight. The Lakers are up 2-1 on the Warriors. The Warriors are playing in Los Angeles. They lost the first game on Saturday night in Los Angeles. So, and it was a blowout. So the question now is, what's going to happen? Do they come back tonight, Monday, and tie up the series 2-2? If they do, it'll be exciting. It'll go 7. The scenario I envision is Warriors win tonight. They got to win one on the road. This is the game they win on the road. They win at home, 3-2, and then they win Game 7. It's going to be close, but they win Game 7 on the road. That's sort of a scenario. They got to win tonight, though, because if they lose tonight and they go down 3-1, oh man, that is hard. And already the Warriors have a kind of a head thing going on about how to play, how to be champions for another year, go back to back. It's hard. It's not easy. It's a psychological game. Whether guys show up. I mean, Stephen Curry there, everyone was like They were just agog. That's the only word. After Stephen Curry scored 50 points against the Kings in Game 7 of that first series, it was a reminder that, oh, Stephen Curry is a great player. But you can't be great every night. And sometimes he's great in other ways, but it's almost like he's got to be 50-point great Stephen Curry every night to win. And I don't know if at age 35 he has it in him every night. He needs help. And right now the Warriors are just, it's kind of obvious their shortcomings. Most of all, that they're short. They're shorter than, the other teams that have 7-footers. So I don't begrudge them their shortness. I kind of understand, but they got to pull it out today to tie it up 2-2, then come home, win 3-2, then they go back on the road, and then, maybe they lose and it's 3-3, and then they come back and win a Game 7. Now that's a scenario. Win a Game 7 at home. That is a possible scenario. But Game 7, you're that old. You got 2 more series to the championship. You got to hope they have enough gas in the tank. I'm a Warrior fan. I've always been one. I told you about my first Warrior games, watching them in the Civic Auditorium in San Francisco. Rick Barry, watching Al Attles and Nate Thurman, Jeff Mullins, Franklin Muley with his deerstalker hat was the owner. I love the Warriors. I hope they have enough gas. All right, that's going to do it for today's show. Hey, look, thanks for listening. If you've missed any or all of this, watching this show on YouTube is not, or YouTube, of course, youtube.com/Emil Amok1, EMILAMOK1. Also, you can catch it on Twitter. And watching it on Twitter isn't all that bad. You got to use your fingers and you got to figure out how to use the little screeny thing. But it's not that bad. Twitter @Emil Amok, EMILAMOK. Also watch it on Facebook, fb.com/EmilGuillermo.media. That's a lot of words, but you can watch it on Facebook. And then, if all else fails, catch it on amok.com, the replay, which I'll post shortly. So we're here Monday through Friday, 2 p.m. Pacific, live because that way, I'm being honest. I don't edit it. I don't read a script. I've got notes. We're just live. And the urgency's there. Regular listeners know I like to meditate. Yeah, meditation. Do nothing. And, if some of you want to meditate with me, I do that. I'd sit in a Zoom room and we just sit and just think good thoughts or no thoughts. Think no thoughts. The best no thoughts. But my go-to, of course, is always the loving kindness meditation, the metta, METTA meditation, showing the love, sending it out. Because as my mother would say, it comes back. It comes back. 2-fold, 3-fold, 4-fold, 5, however many folds you want. It comes back. And so, as I wish for me, I wish for you. May you be safe. May you be happy. May you be healthy. And may you live with ease. Emil Guillermo here. Back in tomorrow. Till next time. Mahal Kita.